Alrighty, good morning everybody. Sorry about the late start here, but let's go ahead and jump right into it since we are starting just a little bit late. I hope you guys had a good afternoon, a good trading day yesterday, and a good night. Let's go ahead and take a look at what happened yesterday. So I warned you guys that being inside of, and let's go up to the higher time frames here, being inside of this previous daily candle, this range from the high of, what was it, Thursday of last week, down to the low of Thursday of last week, inside that pocket, we talked about this whole area being kind of a total mess, right? We did have on the 4-hour going into the open yesterday, if we scroll back to the candle that was just about to close, we talked about seeing, hey, maybe there was some potential bearish divergences going on from the highs, although it was really hard to say until this candle closed. And I think on the hourly I was showing that, there really wasn't anything there that was lighting my fire. But once the market opened and it started to really pull back, that's when we got our 4-hour confirmation, right? Once it broke down below that 4-hour candle. And when we looked up to the hourly, we saw that. And if you go to the chat, I went ahead and let everybody know as we came in here that we had, where is it? Here it is. About 30 minutes after the open, I threw up that 60-minute bearish signal. I said, beware of the bearish counter signal from the morning high, right? So there was some stuff starting to show up after the market opened, and it led to a pullback, and we pushed to a low for the day, but then they popped it right back up basically to the high of the day by the end of the day there, right? So it was a very short-lived pullback. But again, about a half hour after the open, we had the clear signal. And so being short probably would have been the best thing to do. And then again, we got a very shallow pullback. We couldn't even get to the low of Monday's session there. And then they popped it back up to the highs of the day. But every time the market has come up to these highs, you can see we've got very clear bearish signals on the 60, very clear bearish signal on the 4-hour here. From the overnight high yesterday and from the high of the day yesterday. And that brings us up into this morning. So let's look into what happened here on the shortest time frame and look at some of the memorable things. So coming out of the open, remember, before the market opened, we didn't quite have a super clear picture. And I told you as the market was opening here that there was a decent opportunity right off the 200 moving average. So whether you bought that and actually took that trade, that's up to you. But we held here 46.10 quarter to the tick here, and it only went about 3-4 ticks below it. And you could have got this nice pop out of the open. So in the first 20-30 minutes of the open, you could have got yourself a nice trade. Now, did it follow through for an amazing push for 20, 40, 50 points? No. It got up and fell just a couple ticks right in front of the scaffolding. And then that was it, right? And I gave you guys the heads up, 648, 658, somewhere around here, that we started to get some really clear signals for the bears, right? So right around probably as we were failing through VWAP, and that was really the first condition, right? We talk about this in terms of bias. When we see the market break down through the VWAP, that is one of our first signs. Getting through the 200, getting through the VWAP, and then getting through some of the other key levels are all kind of hints in real time as it's happening that maybe things are changing. So there was some bearish stuff going on, and let's take a look. So that was really your first opportunity. Went about 9 points in your favor with about a couple ticks of heat. And then we came down. It held the close of the day before for a pullback, but obviously not enough for a nice sexy trade. And then they came up and probably faked some people out trying to get short off VWAP. So if you tried that, again, it was a decent retracement of this smaller leg right here, right about 50% of that previous overnight leg down, or from the open down, but it didn't hold. So that would have been a loss, or you might have had to got out of that trade. And then it pulled back and held VWAP for another pop. Again, just a very shallow 5.5, 6 point pop. And then right here, couple opportunities you could have bought the VWAP here, but really didn't go anywhere, right? And sure enough, they pushed up and failed to tick in front of the high the day before there. And then the sell-off really started to happen, and we got to the lowest low for the day. As it continued to sell off, you had this. There were some really, really beautiful holds here. So we held the back end of VWAP and the 200 once again. We held the back end of the VWAP and the 200 a second time. And then we held the 200 and arguably the close of the day before. That's 3 tests of the 200 with a really nice hold. Here's another test to the tick, but it only pulled back and held FMA, right? So then it popped right back up. And then these were probably the sexiest opportunities you had yesterday. As the market was selling off, after I gave you that warning that all the things were lining up for the bears, you could have shorted the back end of that VWAP there. Actually, on the first test, it was the VWAP and the 200, but you could have tried each of these tests, and nearly to the tick here, you could have got in for the push to the low of the day. And I don't know if it was a great 20, 30 point push, but you could have gotten over 10 points to the downside if you sorted that area. And then at the end of the day, like I said, they had to go ahead and pop it all the way back up to the high. So again, I've been warning you guys that being up inside of this pocket, let's go up to the daily here, being inside of the pocket of the highs of last week and the lows of last week, it's going to be a messy proposition. And then there's one other critical thing to note here is on the pullbacks, and maybe I should go back to the 512 here. On these pullbacks, we were never able to breach through 50% of last week, right? So we're inside of all of last week's price action. The market pulls back and bounces a little bit in front of 50% of last week. So it looked like maybe the bulls were going to go ahead and, even though they kind of faked out the bears here on the pullback, looked like the bulls maybe were going to hold 50% of last week and continue to push. But what do you know? They faked out the bulls and took it back off the scaffolding in our overnight session here. So literally shorting the scaffolding last night with a couple ticks of heat, you could have taken this whole sell-off. And here we are now. Notice what happened. We held scaffolding, we held the back end of the VWAP there, held the back end of the FMA, came all the way down, and what do you know? Right to the 200 moving average here last night. This was about 7 a.m. on the East Coast. So anyone out there getting ready for work, looking at your charts, you could have caught this unbelievable opportunity. There was even the Holy Orange power level that didn't break by more than basically a point. And again, if you took the 200, you took a tick or two of heat, and you could have rode this thing all the way down all morning. You could be done. You don't even have to trade this morning if you took the short off the 200 there. And as you can see, riding down the FMA, and now we're holding, interestingly enough, right at the 50% of last week. Okay, it ducked down by about 2 points through it, exactly 2 points, or 2 points and a quarter, and now we're getting a little minor rotation. So let's go ahead and jump up to the higher time frames and get this pre-market going. We did start